We're right around you. All right, number two, and before we go into number two, Ms. Darby, would you like to make a statement?
I would. As many of you may know, I'm the owner of Spatial Transportation. I do not work for the school system or the district in any way. I am hired by private individuals to provide transportation services. I will be participating in discussion and voting on this matter as it is important to my constituents. I will be discussing and voting in the best interest of my constituents and the district as a whole.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Sullivan.
Yeah, so to kind of follow up, this item was brought by the individual board member, it was actually brought by our staff at the district office. So there are several changes that we need to kind of look at. Thank you, our bus contractors, for being here. I know this is vital for you guys as well to be aware of what's going on. So I wanted to take some time and just clarify and explain kind of where we are as we move forward. First, no one is losing any routes, so that's a good thing to discuss. Are routes potentially going to have to be moved because of this? Yes, they would have to be moved, which is allowable as part of the contract. In looking at TCA, so the board members have these, and I'll highlight for everybody to know. So TCA 49-6-2101. So that is the 49 is education, part 21 is transportation, so 49-6-2101. And this is important for a reason. So there's a couple things I'm going to read, just A and B. So it talks about powers of board to provide transportation. Boards of education may provide school transportation facilities for children who live more than 1.5 miles. So that's the key one, 1.5 miles by the nearest accessible route from the school to which they are assigned by the Board of Education in which they're enrolled. The second part is what we do as a district. Boards of education may, in their discretion, provide school transportation facilities for children who live less than 1.5 miles by the nearest accessible route from the school in which they are enrolled. And this is key. But the county shall not be entitled to receive state transportation funds for any student other than children with physical disabilities who live less than 1.5 miles by the nearest accessible route from the school in which they're enrolled. So previous, and I think this is great for everyone to be aware of, under BP, our basic education program, the board has a copy of that. It's connected to this whole thing. Starts kind of on the back of the second page. There's only one part, because we're not under BP anymore. There's one part I wanted to highlight, and it's on the second to last page. It is pupil transportation allocated to systems that provide transportation. So we would receive an allocation. Formula established by the Commissioner of Education based on the number of pupils transported, miles transported, and density of pupils per route mile. So under BP, there was a funding for transportation. If you'll go back and flip over to the second one now, this shows Appendix E, District Transportation Allocations for fiscal year 19. And so under this, you will see Rutherford County was $13,295,000. That number's high because you do some calculations. Roughly, you're looking at 7 to 8 million is what the county would have been generating for transportation funds. The city is included as well. One that I always think, when you're looking at these, yes, it says fiscal year 19, that is normal for the state, they're 2 years behind. So this is the last time the state looked at this, and it was the 21 school year. But it was reporting back on fiscal year 2019. So we're receiving somewhere between 7 and 8 million of that 13 million for transportation. What is new is the TISA formula. And so TISA rolled everything into the base, which originally sounds great. You hear us talk about $6,860 per kid that we get for base funding. What is not great is that transportation is no longer spelled out. It was rolled into the base. So you are funded exactly the same if you provide transportation to every kid, or if you are like other districts. I know we have one in Tullahoma that does not provide hardly any transportation. We get the same $68.60 per student, regardless of what we do. So that is a change that is substantial, and there are two aspects of that. One aspect of this conversation is financial, one is the logistics. I don't want to be bringing this before the board or topic for conversation either. I would much rather this just keep rolling the way it is. That's the easy way. It keeps everybody happy, makes our contractors and bus drivers happy. It also keeps our parents happy. But we also have to look at this as a business and look at what we are truly going to have to operate in the next couple of years, because things are gonna have to come to a head. One, our transportation costs will continue to increase. And we are now funded without transportation. And so that financial incentive to provide transportation is no longer there. And so that's number one. The second part of that is kind of our assets. And so right now, Trey, how many open routes?
5.
So we have 5 open routes. Most districts have struggled much more than we have, so kudos to our contractors, our transportation department for keeping our routes filled. Using across the news and across the nation, transportation issues. We haven't faced that. I'm very concerned we are close to facing that. And so this mode is a way, or this proposal is a way to try to foresee that and eliminate it. We will probably be all right, honestly, this next school year. When we open our new school is when we're gonna struggle. We are going to have next year routes that are definitely doubled up more than we have right now. From a logistical and operational standpoint, what that does is if you have an elementary school dismisses at 2:30, teachers are contracted for 15 minutes after students dismiss, it is a domino effect. If you double up an elementary school route, they have to come back to your elementary school, pick up a second route. Now you have extra contracted costs for your educators and your staff watching them. Then that builds, that elementary school's gonna come back and pick up middle school routes. That's gonna get further behind. And then by the time you get to high school, you end up with high school buses that haven't picked up yet an hour and 15, an hour and a half past when kids need to be picked up and brought on. So is it doable? Can we still provide transportation? Yes. Is it going to cause some logistical nightmares? Yes. So that's the aspect of what this kind of looks at. From a budget standpoint, and Greg, please correct me if I'm wrong, or when I'm wrong, I guess is probably the better way of putting it. What are we looking at budgeting if everything stays as is? How many new routes do we need to add next year?
I think we've asked for 12. 7 and 5. 7 regular buses, 5 sped buses.
Okay, so that would be 12, so that's gonna have an increased cost. The other aspect of that is, what is the extra additional funds that we have, because we talked about this, whether it was the GPS and Edgelog, the routes, what are the extra costs?
I mean, as far as we go, that would be pretty much it. We have the route built in, and we have the GPS, and we would have to buy the radio now because the county, once they funded the original number of radios for buses, they don't fund those anymore. So it would be the radio, the GPS, and the counters.
So what we're looking at, and again, these are estimate numbers as we're still building our budget, it's pretty accurate, so definitely take note of these. From a contract with vehicle owners, if we keep things as is, we're looking at $27,169,404. And again, we may have to adjust that a couple thousand, $27,169,404. If we establish the 1 mile radius, it would be roughly $26,450,000 that we would look to. So there is savings, but again, it's not necessarily the savings we're more worried about long-term around. We are going to have to hone in savings at some point. What is the, I guess, strange part of this is the way a lot of districts are operating and have been operating. Murfreesboro City put this into place last year. I don't know, I didn't hear a lot about Murfreesboro City doing it. My guess is Murfreesboro City parents that could provide transportation probably became Rutherford County parents. And that could be why our enrollment increased. That's my guess. I can't prove it, but that's my guess. And so I don't like that we're in this situation, but I'm running it from a business aspect, and I'll support whatever the board so chooses. But this is just an avenue, and I think, Trey, anything else you want to add to that? You sent the board what the estimated cost savings would be last week, multiple.
Yeah, I think the thing that, and I don't do social media, most of y'all already do that, but I do hear, I have children and friends that are on it, and they send me things. The two things that I think have been kind of misleading is that we're trying to eliminate contractors. I'm not. I need everyone I got. I'm 5 short right now, and I'd love to have 5 more. we're gonna need another 12 next year. I prefer to look at this as asset management. Every one of those contracts is an asset to Rutherford County Schools. And if we want to continue to provide a pretty good level of service, we've begun to think outside the box. And we've begun 6 months ago, and I discussed some of this with you all at the board retreat. Contractors are not going anywhere. I need to keep them all. Will some routes technically be eliminated? Sure. Am I gonna send somebody that's been driving in Kittrell all their life to Laverne? No. That's not our intent either. We're gonna keep them as close as they can. Typically, we would shift. Routes would just kind of shift. We would push in. We currently have 50 routes and buses that are running right at capacity. To solve a overcrowded bus is two things. We look at redoing the route, which means we take some children off one bus and put them on another. That works if they're running, pretty comparable zones, but if I've got a hole in that zone, meaning I've got an open route between those two bus routes, and those two contractors are already helping us by covering that third route, and they become full, my option is to run a double route. And I'm not gonna say bus contractors like it or don't like it, because they're getting paid by the mile. So if they drive more miles, they get paid more money over their standard route. But when I put those together and start running double routes, if there's not another bus available, which is where we're sitting in a number of locations on the north end, we're back to Dr. Sullivan's issue. Now, Ms. Barnett's gonna call, and I'll just throw it out there today, she's gonna call the principal at Rocky Fork Elementary tomorrow, and he's not gonna be a happy camper. We don't have a bus to slide in, we're overloaded, we're supposed to run a double run, and he's gonna throw a fit. I can't help it. I don't justify another route. I don't have enough things that are close. That bus has got 91 children on it. 31 of them are in the neighborhood adjacent to the school. But you all want transportation. And I'm here to do the best we can. I'm looking at ways, thinking outside the box, that we can continue this service. When we make the shift next year, I call it the North End Elementary rezone shift. It's really a shift. We're gonna move some Roy Waldron to Laverne Lake. We're gonna move some Laverne Lake to John Coleman. We're gonna move some Smyrna Elementary to John Coleman. That's gonna require some additional buses. We're gonna open Simon Springs next year. We're gonna be taking some special education students from various places to Laverne. I'm gonna need some buses to do that. Go ahead.
You're probably gonna need one as well. Right now, we're getting close to overloading Stewartsboro from all the Stewarts Creek.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that one.
Stewarts Creek to
I'm
Branch Chapel.
gonna need a third one by the end of the year. So I say all that to say this. Nobody's losing their contract. Nobody's going anywhere. It's a parent responsibility zone. We are maybe, and I can't get information from every single rural county. We are the only one left doing this. Knox County, Hamilton County, they've been doing this since '09. They do the 1 mile for K6, 7 to 12 is 1.5 miles. The other thing we're talking about, this will not affect our title schools, which are our most in-need children. We're not doing title. You don't do it, we continue doing what we're doing. We've got a budget for it. We know what it's gonna cost. We're gonna continue to do the best we can with what we got. My concern is we're gonna be somewhere around that 8 to 10 route next year. And what's really scary, if we get there, is when we open Beatty and we make this big shift and I gotta have 7 to 8 buses for Beatty. Now, we'll probably have some people sign up for it. Not a bad location. but it's gonna be a rezone, so even then, some of these contractors that are running routes now, their route's not gonna be the same in 2 years, because of that rezone. There'll be a few that is. So, whether you choose to look at it as a cost-saving measure, true, we do save some money, but the money that I'm saving is not in a loss of contractor, it's I'm not adding that additional bus next year. I'm reallocating these assets to better suit me, which we have that, it's in our contract. We can do that anyway. We're putting it out there, but because the reason we're sitting here with you guys is because it would be a change of, we currently provide transportation for all. And the change would be going to 1 mile. And if that's not what you want, we'll continue on, and I'll say we've given it our best shot, and we'll do the best we can next year with what we have.
Thank you. Questions?
Madam Chair.
You want her to go first?
Okay.
Ms. Maxwell?
We all got the same emails, and I'm very, very cognizant of the fact that nobody wants a kindergartner. If you take sped out, you take Title I away, kindergarten walking down a busy highway like Rockville or Christiana where they wrecks all the time. Have we looked at, and I know this is probably a logistical nightmare, have we looked at where it does make sense? In maybe doing, like, say, first grade and up or second grade and up? I don't know all the neighborhoods, Stewart's Creek and Blackman, but there are some areas that it does make maybe more logistical sense.
It would
does
be
lot.
a nightmare to try and pick and choose.
Persuaded.
It's an
Yeah.
absolute, the other thing we looked at, and what Williamson County's looking at, they were looking at doing this year. They're a little different than we are, their neighborhoods are not near as large, they're still a little rural. I'm gonna spread out maybe is a better term. What they have done, because so many of their new subdivisions have sidewalks, they've gone to hub stops. Meaning, instead of driving through the neighborhood and having 6 to 8 to 10 stops, they're doing one stop in front of the neighborhood, and you gotta get your kid up in the front of the neighborhood. Whether it's a half mile or 3/4 of a mile or whatever it is, you gotta get your kid to that one stop. What that does for them, it's a time thing. They're not so much in the capacity area that we are. Their concern is because they're spread out, it's time. So if I can eliminate 15 minutes in a neighborhood and I can make one stop and pick it up, I can put more students on my bus. They did their analyzation, so they're putting it off for a year, and they're gonna go to hub stops this year.
So that would really help us.
It would, we've got, our problem is if you go into Smyrna, and that's, you look at all the older subdivisions around Smyrna Middle, that around Smyrna Middle in front of Thurman Francis or around Smyrna Primary, they've got a sidewalk around the block. The rest of those subdivisions that have been there since the 60s and 70s, there's no sidewalks there. And the roads are the same width they were when they were built. So the answer is no, it wouldn't work for us.
I can believe that because I live on Southeast Broad, and there is no sidewalks.
No,
and there are
there's not.
curbs, and there are wrecks every day.
And there's not a,
I'm in the middle of town.
there's not a good, other than continue doing what we're doing.
Mr. Tindall?
I had a couple of questions. What schools will the routes be at? 12 that you mentioned? Where is that?
It varies and it depends on our enrollment. My guess right now, we would need 3 to 5 for this rezoning thing, because what's gonna happen is I got the same amount of kids, but I'm driving more miles. That child that would have been going to Laverne Lakes now going to John Coleman. As the crow flies, if I could drive across the airbase, I could be right there. This is the part that is really becoming a huge impact for us, is the traffic in Smyrna, in Laverne, in Murfreesboro, where we used to be able to get from Blackman High to Smyrna West in 15 minutes, now takes 30. So that is across the district. So each year we're having to add buses because we can no longer compete with the traffic. The bus, if we weren't having the issue, could actually load and carry more children. but because of traffic, we can't. So those 12, the vast majority of them are gonna be from Blackman North. We'll probably have 3 or 4 on this end, but the majority of them will be up there. The majority of the sped buses is gonna be for foster children, Atlas, the big programs, the transportation of the students to the other end, and alternative school.
Now, you mentioned, I think that a lot of the emails that came through had to do with like, they're not getting sidewalks. Christiana being a great example, crossing 231 for some of those neighborhoods. People are assuming that if they don't have transportation, then their student's gonna be walking. And I don't think that's really the idea here, right? I mean, it's a parent responsibility zone, so it's either carpooling, I don't know, some other means. But I think because it's such a huge change, I'd much rather see it phased in. If we got it in the budget, then we're giving basically 4 months' notice right now. If we delay this until district-wide rezone, which is gonna be a whole logistical change, and we implement it at that point, then, you know, you are still getting some of the savings, you're still feeling, some of the, reallocating some of the assets, as you said, and it gives parents more time to prepare in those zones.
So how do you phase in? What would be your idea?
Well, that's what I'm running through right now. One of the ideas I think you've already killed, which is like looking at neighborhoods that are worthy of walking, but you just thinking that'd just be a nightmare.
I think it would end up if we try to do that from a logistical standpoint with our kids and our teachers and who's doing what, I'd rather just keep it.
Even if you tried to do it by school, then I think it would be very difficult. You couldn't separate, and I'm gonna pick something, Smyrna Primary. It would have to be all of Smyrna Primary is under this program or none of Smyrna Primary. You couldn't split it. It would be very difficult from a student administrator standpoint to get this child can or can't. The other thing that happens with that, we start having a lot of students with new addresses. To get around it, we have this problem now, where we implement something like this in a student's address. And I guess if we're laying our cards on the table tonight, we have another thing that's kind of driving this bus. We have a large number of students that are being taken to a different address than what's on their enrollment form. Meaning that child is, its address is where supposedly it lives, and I'm not saying that they don't. But in the afternoon, they go to grandma's, they go to Aunt Susie's, they go to whatever. And it's very difficult for us as a transportation system and the contractors to verify where these kids go. Currently, all they have to do is provide a note to the principal. The principal says they can get on, and I'm not being derogatory toward the principal, but they allow the child to get on whatever bus, and it's on us to get them there. Well, the contractors are the ones that are we're calling in daily. I got a kid with a note, it doesn't ride my bus, can somebody verify that this kid's supposed to be on my bus? Because what happens is if they get there, that child's not supposed to be on their bus. And then that child goes, well, whatever, then that driver's home carrying them back to school. Or waiting on the police to come pick them up, or there's all kinds of, we just don't turn a child loose.
The other side of that is you have a parent who says, I wrote a note, what do you mean you didn't drop your kid off? I told you to drop.
So it gets the more one-offs we try and do makes it
More complicated.
It's more complicated, and we have more opportunities to misplace a child.
All right, so which took hubs basically opposite, that's really not gonna help us. If we went, a lot of the concern, I think, is around elementary primarily. And if we went, I think we already had this discussion, but just for having it out in the open now, if we decided to go just middle and high, this first oncoming year, and do elementary later, you're saying there wouldn't be a whole lot of savings.
It'd be very little savings, and I
And we're
continue
saying
to,
it's not talking about money, we're talking about routes.
it would be basically maybe 1
Yeah.
or 2, because we have more elementary schools than we have anything. So I've still gotta have all those contractors to run all those routes at the elementary, doing the middle and the high, okay, I'm maybe, I can't send, do I send one of those buses home after it runs elementary, cause I don't have enough middle? Do you see where I'm going with it? I'm not saying that we wouldn't, it becomes, I've still gotta have everybody I've got, maybe one, I'll pick up one or two. I've been down a lot of these.
Do we have any responsibility zones right now? If you're under a half mile, or we think
No, sir.
if you're next door to the school,
We don't have any,
have we looked at a half mile? Would that be on the table?
it would, I would say it would be more help than a phase-in.
Madam Chair, Ms. Darby?
Okay. So, if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying it's kind of a, we need to do it or not do it.
Yes, ma'am.
So one of my biggest concerns, and one of the biggest concerns I've heard from my constituents, Rock Springs Elementary School, which I'm super familiar with, is not in a place, quite frankly, that almost anybody can walk to at all. It's a scary enough area to drive at a lot of times. So my concern would be, I know that's not the only school on some of these 2-lane roads with no sidewalks and things like that. And while I can appreciate not doing this to the Title I schools, but the Title I schools are not the only schools with 2 working parents who are utilizing bus services to get their kids to and from school so that they can get to and from work. I don't have an issue. I know that it would be more difficult and I don't know if there are different systems that would help with that or what that might look like, but I think of Rock Springs Middle, for instance, has many,
Lakeview, Kittrell, pick one.
like lots of sidewalks, lots of neighborhoods right there. I think there are some schools where it would work out probably fairly well and you wouldn't have so much of an issue, but I don't know if the idea to try it with 1 or 2 of those schools would be an option just to see and even get public perception on how they're feeling about it. It's difficult, I think the timing that this has been brought up as well. I've had constituents reach out and say, I would have applied for my kid to go to one of the magnet schools because I have someone that lives close to there, but that I don't have that option because it's closed right now. Some of the after-school programs are already on wait lists or full. So I think some of it too is the timing in which this is being brought up because it's not really there are people feeling like it's not giving them enough time. When it comes to, are we including, I know at the work session, the alternative schools were brought up.
Yeah, I talked to both principals of the alternative school, while that would help us from a logistics standpoint, it's not something I recommend right now. So you've got a couple options with the alternative school. One, looking at those students, are they going to come to school? And I'm just being honest, I'm not sure that there's things in them to come to school. The second aspect is safety. I mean, you have a student that can go to alternative school for many things, but I also don't want those students being dropped off by I don't know who, or trying to say I'm parking my car here and we're not letting them drive their car. So for those reasons, the principals were adamant, no, I like it from a logistics standpoint, from an operational standpoint, I totally see where they're coming from.
I can appreciate that. I will, on the flip side, say it would be hard for me to tell a parent that their child doesn't have a ride to school when a child who has gotten in trouble has a ride to their school. That's a difficult thing to justify. On the funding side, if I'm reading this correct, the BEP formula says, based on the number of pupils transported, miles transported, and the density of pupils per route mile. So in the BEP formula, we were only getting paid for the students that were being transported.
Over a mile and a half.
Right, but on the TISA funding, it's included, but it's included for every student, whether they're being driven or driven on a bus, correct?
Yes, they put that in, and whether or not a district provides transportation or not, you all get the same.
Right, but meaning here, like if I drive my kids to school, the BEP formula didn't give you any money for them.
Correct.
So TISA just built it into the base for all students, period, whatever that amount, I mean, the magical amount that they.
If you can figure out what it is.
Right, okay, well, I'm just, trying to talk about, and I can appreciate the trying to save money, and again, looking at how we're talking about saving money, if we need to discuss ways to save money, I feel like there are a lot of things that should be discussed, brought to the table before, I guess, we start removing services from our constituents. I know we pay almost $500,000 for the voluntary pre-K program that we are not required to provide. Again, I would struggle telling someone that we're gonna pull their bus service from them because we're required to teach that kid while we're spending extra money if we need to find ways to save that money. So there are just some things that I think maybe require a deeper look or more discussion maybe, but just some thoughts I had.
Let me, for me, this is not about saving money. It's an asset management. It's a way to continue to provide the same level that we're providing now. Now, we either do or we don't.
Michelle.
Thank you. When I went to school, it's a long time ago, my mother paid for my neighbor for me to go and stay at their house. She dropped me off and I had breakfast and we all walked to school and came back and then she came to pick me up later in the afternoon. Is there not some way that we can, and look, y'all, if we all had money, we wouldn't have it, we'd be still sitting here. But those parents, if we did do the mile or mile and a half, could we not reimagine our school day for them and maybe have some, EAs there in the morning that they could do more schooling in the morning and the parents can drop them off, so they're still not walking, but they're being dropped off by their parents, but there's someone there. I know when my son was in school, we could only drop them off so early. And trust me, at 7:15 to try to get downtown Nashville by 8 o'clock, it's almost impossible. So, I think everyone on the board has had children or have children and trying to get them back and forth. I think we need to kind of think out more outside the box on this.
This next one is you and Ms. West.
I was gonna ask to pull up the alternative school and say if that would help us with our capacity, but,
It would,
I thought
it would
that's
help
something
with the special ed buses, yes. But it
By
would
the
not
same
help
token,
with the large buses.
I'm concerned that they won't show up.
True, and we did, there again, it's,
And this is not a, I didn't bring it up when we talked about it, this is not a popular thing to bring up, and a conversation we have to have, so I know it's late, and I'm sorry that it's late, but try not to add every controversial thing to the agenda. I appreciate the conversations, there's no hurt feeling regardless of which way we go, because it is what it is with the conversations we have to have.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Young?
I was looking over this Tennessee code annotated, 49.6.2101, power of boards to provide transportation. We flip over to G, and we read that, there's a section here talking about special hazards shall include any absence of sidewalks, a highway before or more lanes, the intersection where right turns are red or is prohibited. One or more sexual offenders as defined, violent sexual offenders, as defined. It's saying that they reside in the area or any other condition that could affect the safety or well-being of children walking to school. The LEA determines a special hazard zone is present. It shall submit its findings to the entity responsible for the road or highway. The entity is responsible for the road or highway is encouraged to cooperate with LEA to devise methods to minimize the hazardous conditions. So if we go to our county and tell them we need sidewalks.
Where am I here?
We're sitting.
We got to do besides one more time, we need to create a policy for this development.
Coy, I recommend you take on that task.
Well, it's cheaper to pay bus transportation than to go sidewalks.
Just don't make me go to the city, please, somebody else will.
No, I'm just saying, there's a clause in there. Good morning.
Ms. Darby?
I think Mr. Young brings up a good point, and I almost wonder if we did get with the county and maybe look at, hey, we're not gonna ask you for sidewalks, but can the county contribute I don't wanna call it a scholarship, but maybe some money to help purchase more buses or different things of that nature that might be beneficial. I don't know, I'm just throwing some things out there, but.
Good luck. Great idea, but good luck.
Oh,
Plus, we gotta
sidewalk
throw
idea.
stuff at the wall and see what sticks.
Good luck. Great idea.
Anybody else?
Good luck with that one. I think it's, Ms. Brack, I'm gonna say it's a very hard decision, and another county is growing a lot in the student funding. I know the TSA formula changed the funding and brought more funding, but the component's a little bit more convenient because it gave funding specifically to certain areas, like for example, the capital projects, which is something that I have tacked on and tried to get funding for and going to the legislature to get money for that and changing the TSA formula. It's a hard decision and there's arguments for why there is looking into it, and there's also the argument of, the parents as well, and so, I'm just saying it's a hard decision.
I think the unfortunate part is TISA almost incentivizes you not to provide transportation. Just based on, I try to be very aware, based on reading the bill, I request we just go ahead, instead of voting on this, move this to further study to be able to discuss, as we do with the zoning. I know there's no motion or anything, but unless somebody just totally against that,
Wait,
Further study?
he wants to postpone a table. I think he wants to postpone.
I heard you have a good point, why, and I'd much rather look at it,
You'd like to do some more study.
especially when we have a new school.
I think that'd be
True.
cool. So I think we can postpone it.
I think we should do a safety feasibility study. I'm not sure how much they also know.
Can
What
we,
now? I'm sorry, I zoned out.
A safety feasibility study
For what?
Yeah, I
for
think-
areas.
I don't think there is any feasibility as far as kids walking. I mean, where we are, I think it comes down to our parents versus the school system. So I think you're right, we are not built for a walkable,
No, we're not.
we're not a walkable county.
Some of the new subdivisions are, but 80% of the older portions of all the cities and areas, rural, they're not set up for that.
So we are going to postpone this for further study, and we'll come back and revisit.
can I make a recommendation that we create a committee to look into this?
You can.
That I would like to recommend to form a committee to look into this proposal of what the impact will be.
We will come back and revisit the entire thing as well as a committee.
Okay, great, thank you.
So if we're gonna postpone it, it'd be after budget, so it'd be something we would look at in the summer.
Yep.
Okay.
So that tells us how to budget.
So, and then we'll discuss if we're gonna meet a committee then?
Yes, ma'am, we will.
Oh, okay, great, thank you.
Mr. Brown,
Jittle.
do we need to vote and postpone this?
We can't vote.
I know, I'm saying, on Thursday.
We're talking on Thursday, vote, that's fine.
Great.
The recommendations being made, we're gonna vote.
Gotcha, okay,
Okay.
that's
Alright.
good.
Dick is the horse dead. Can we stop here? Okay,